feel good.
Hi, everybody. I try to be very informal in my presentations. I like to talk, but I also like to be talked to. So please, if you have questions, comments, things that have come up in your clubs that you want to problem solve with the massive amount of brains out there, not just this one reasonable one here. So, as was introduced, sometimes things go wrong. The title that Jeff came up with for this presentation was How to Handle Volunteers. I thought that was extraordinarily diplomatic.
I'll give Mark credit for that one. I stole it.
Okay. So, we're not just going to talk about volunteers, we're going to talk about when volunteering goes wrong. So, how many people here enjoy conflict? Oh, we got a few. I don't know.
I'm Irish, I do.
Oh dear. I'll be back. I got to talk and rewrite this. Now, how many people have conflict in their clubs come up now and then? Whew. Okay, I have something to talk about that's relevant. So, where does the conflict come from in your clubs? What are the things that are the sticking points? These can be things that flare up now and then, or these chronic issues that just don't go away.
We just talked about one, membership. Everybody's always fighting over it.
Fighting over membership. Okay.
Members that perhaps have been doing a job for a long, long time, and then start to not do it, and how do you handle that? How do you move them out and somebody else in?
Right. Someone's, for every week, month after month, year after year perhaps, has done something, and then they just hit the off switch. Yeah.
Perpetual leadership, people who've been on the board forever, and if you were going to try to change them out, they're going to be pissed, and so you're afraid they're going to leave the club. So how do you make a board relevant instead of being the old folks who've always done it this way?
Right. Healthy doses of diplomacy. Go ahead.
Fatal personality conflicts when you're volunteering together trying to plan an event.
Yeah, people are passionate about Rotary, hopefully. And conflict comes up because sometimes passion is different.
Change. Some people don't want to change the way we've always done it.
Change is scary. No one likes change. It's bad, in fact. No, maybe not, but.
One other thing too, and this is something all of us in leadership have to be careful of. Our Rotarians don't want to be preached to. They're here on their own time. And we're guilty of it, and maybe that's something you could help us address how to do.
I've had members who have been in leadership positions who think that their way is the only way.
That's right. You can't do it that way. This is the way we do this project. Donna?
We think someone's going to be competent in doing something, and they're not.
Can't talk about me that way, Don.
Is there a way to remove them diplomatically or whatever?
We give them responsibility, we dump all this, and they go, ah! And disappear or don't do it. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about the prior to conflict part. The best way to deal with conflict is to avoid it in the first place, minimize its occurrence. Some conflict, unavoidable. It is going to happen. But if we can lay an effective groundwork, that makes it much less likely that we're going to see some of the flare-ups that we've talked about. But once it does happen, I'm going to talk about how we deal with it, how you either deal directly. So in the case of a direct conflict, you as a club leader realize something is going on. Someone has a beef with you, someone is not doing something they should for the good of the club, and you have to directly address them. That's one type of conflict. The other is going to be the situation that you are going to observe. That is, Karen and Ivar, I'm picking on them because I have to see them next week, and I can apologize if I offend them. They are squabbling every board meeting, every Rotary meeting.
Why are you talking about us two when it's us two?
Well, see, the reason why is I didn't want to touch too close to home. I picked the unrealistic conflict.
Again, we squabble over who they're squabbling over.
And Donna, we're gonna still use you. I'm picking on my own club, it seems fair. Says, oh, Ivar and Karen are going to kill each other. I have to do something. And I'm going to talk about how you step in when it's another conflict between two members, not just between yourself. So, the good reason why there's conflict in Rotary is we're all passionate about it. We're all enthusiastic volunteers. We just have different ideas about how to accomplish some of that enthusiasm. Sometimes we have different priorities, different time frames. Someone says, oh, I can get this done immediately after the meeting, be it board, Rotary meeting. Another person says, well, gee, I have to wait till the weekend when I have a bit of free time. That is going to cause conflict. And how you talk about the conflict makes all the world of difference. But starting out, how do you prevent conflict from occurring, or at least reduce it? Clear communication is the biggest facilitator of smooth sailing. So when you're communicating responsibilities to someone, here's what we want you to do, here's when we want you to do it, here's how we want you to do it, if those are all important. If, for example, it really doesn't matter how you increase membership, as long as you increase membership, you probably don't need to say, here's what you have to do. You can couch it in terms of what you think is a good idea, what you think would be beneficial, but say, hey, this is your bag, you do with it as you like. Structure makes a huge difference as well. If, like on our training today, there is a bunch of time frames, a bunch of names, a bunch of titles of presentations. That makes it very clear to you what we're going to be doing. When we come up with a project and we give someone a responsibility, we're not always good at clearly structuring, because in the case of people that have done it for years and years and years, you know exactly what needs to be done. You know how it needs to be done, what the appropriate people to contact are, and you're operating on almost an instinctive level. A new person coming into that sort of position is not going to have that same understanding. So you're going to have to spend a lot of time thinking, what do I know about automatically? How do I communicate that? And that can be very difficult to do, because how do you ride a bike? Can anyone explain in a sentence how you ride a bicycle? Probably not, because we do so much automatically, and we have turned so much into that complicated behavior into almost instinct. So communication, discussion, making it okay, and this probably goes in the face of another Rotary slang, okay to say no. I've also heard the only time you get to say no in Rotary is when you're asked to join. But if you feel overwhelmed, like you can't do something, you have to be able to say, gee, I don't know if I can do this. You have to feel open to tell someone, and you have to, as Rotary leadership, be able to communicate that. Not necessarily directly. You don't want to say, I'm going to ask you to do something, but it's entirely okay if you say no. Then they're going to be much more likely to say no. But you want to make it a dialogue. Make it okay to discuss until they say, well, I maybe can't do the initial offering, but we can negotiate. We can come up with, here's what I feel like I can do. When it comes to how to handle the conflict once it comes up, well, before I get directly, any questions on reducing the risk of conflict? Any questions related to presenting things for people so that we don't have them barking at us? Okay. So 2 types of conflict I'm going to identify. One, as I talked about, is the direct person-to-person conflict. How do you handle conflict when it is with an individual that you are directly interfacing with rather than an observer role? So, first thing is being brave enough to bring it up, to talk about it. We avoid conflict most of the time. We have a very high threshold of toleration for a lot of annoying things. In a lot of ways, that's how we've gotten to be successful in life, is not sweating the small stuff. Excuse me. But when we raise that bar way too high, by the time it gets to be something we're going to address, we see red about this conflict. We look at the person, we think, I want to throttle you. or some variation of bodily harm, depending on your particular creative milieu. We want to get to it before that, because when we see red, the part of our brain that is responsible for planning out the consequences of our actions, thinking, you know, maybe that's not the nicest thing to say. That part of the brain has shut down, gone on vacation. The part of the brain that's working is the caveman part. Caveman part has two goals in life: hit things with big heavy sticks or run away. Neither of which are particularly helpful. But that part of the brain still persists in ruling the roost when we're really agitated. So we address conflict early, and we do it in a way that is not insulting, not belittling, that doesn't stir the pot further. And one of the ways that we do that, and this is something I use in my clinical work, I'm a clinical psychologist, I do a lot of work with families and with couples. And if this can work with a couple that's been throwing plates at each other, this can work with reasonably well-adjusted Rotarians. I am an optimist. Excuse me. And just like the families that are throwing plates at each other, it takes practice, it takes work to do this. It doesn't always work the first time. Sometimes you have to go back, and I'll get to that at the end. But you want to do something that the fancy term is called the floor technique. And it's called that because one person has the floor at a time. It's very artificial, and you don't necessarily have to use it exactly rigidly because it is a really unusual way of communicating, but it brings tension down. The basic tenets to start with that you do want to adhere to, though. So, you are a jerk. It sounds really bad. You are disrupting the club. You are getting in the way of us getting our goals done. You're wasting time. Kind of agitating, insulting. You know, there's a finger involved. When you point a finger at someone, they don't like it. So you step back from the yous, and you start with I. I'm worried about. I'd like to see how we can fix this. I'm feeling pressed for time when this happens. I'm worried that we're not going to achieve this goal. Not, you know, I really think you're a jerk. That's the cop out of the I statement. Was that a hand or?
No.
Okay.
I was agreeing.
I'm agreeing, I like it.
Okay, good. Yeah, there's a place for you statements in all these. Because if you cannot say you can't talk about what someone did. But when you're talking about what someone else is doing in a club, that's a problem. You don't put opinion in there. You rip all those opinions out and you leave observables. So, when you asked 17 questions at the very end of the meeting when everyone else was going, that I felt agitated. I felt like the club was getting worried, frustrated, whatever feeling you want to do and label. The other thing is, sometimes when there's a conflict, it's messy. It's not one little thing. There's so much to tease out and put in the realm of conflict resolution. But you don't have to manage it all at one time. Because if you dump, you know, if you come in and you've got this list, let me address my grievances here. Point 1, subpoint A. You're going to lose them. You're never going to accomplish anything. You pick the most important, and this could be the first thing, the thing that just set the ball rolling. This could be the worst, the thing that made you cringe the most. And you pick that as your issue. You make it simple. You make it restricted to the one thing, because a reasonable expectation is crucial. You also don't storytell. If you can do it in a sentence or two, your I statements, do it. Give them a chance to respond after that. Because if, again, you come up with a whole bunch of stuff, you're not going to get your answers. Because they're going to latch on to one of the things you said. In part because our brain can only hold so much in it. But two, there's going to be something that sticks in their craw and they say, I want to talk about that. And that may not be what you want to talk about. So, any questions on direct conflict? How do you process it? How do you talk about it in terms of the I statements? We'll get to how you deal with their responses next. Because the goal of dealing with conflict is not just the airing of grievances, it's getting a solution. And there's a lot of variables. You don't know what you're going to get when you address a conflict. You don't know if the person will be reasonable or unreasonable. You don't know if the person is going to even see the conflict that you see. But you listen to what they said. You encourage them to talk, to not feel shut down. You phrase it in the framework of a solution. Hey, we're all working towards something great here. Let's try and make us a little more so. And depending on what you get as a response, if they're unreasonable, that's really not going to happen that often. Because theoretically, the really unreasonable, unable to handle conflict people aren't going to wind up in your club. Not for very long. Because generally speaking, service above self doesn't fit with being an unreasonable person. Some exceptions, maybe. Possibly. But when someone comes back and gives you their response, so if you say, you know, I'm really worried about time management in our club, and I really would hope we can find a way to streamline. And the person says, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. They may not actually know that you're talking directly to them, but you've gotten them on board with the concept. So then you want to think in terms of building blocks. Put things together, a plan. I talked about structure earlier. You want to put together a game plan that makes sense and does address the conflict. If you don't even have to directly say you're the problem and you address the issue, great. If it is a you moment, then you talk about, well, what's going on that's happening? Let me help. What can I do? Not, we need to stop and it's your issue. We all work better when we help each other. And the ways in which we can do that are many. And we don't actually have time to go over all that, but phrase it in the term of helping. Phrase it in, I want to help deal with this. And you can even find a way that you connect with them. So if there's someone who interrupts to the 10th degree, maybe you've interrupted once or twice, but you pull that into the realm of experience to say, I do it too. You don't have to say, well, I don't do it nearly as bad as you do, but you allow that connection that, hey, we're all kind of the same in these issues. They're universal in some sense. So, moving on to mediated conflict. Two club members aren't getting along. And you see it and you figure this is going to cause the club to go up in flames eventually. Hopefully metaphorically, but potentially literally. So, first bit, again, laying the groundwork. Talk to each individual on their own first. See what they see the problem as. Odds are they're not going to deny it, because if you can see it, they can probably see it. Probably everyone in the club and perhaps the people wandering by the room during the meeting can see it. Find out what they see the problem is. Find out how they want it addressed, because they may say, you know, I don't really want to talk about it. And then you got to soft sell it. You got to persuade them, because if conflict doesn't get addressed, it continues on, and very rarely does it just peter out. War of attritions are not great ways to run clubs. So, find out what they see the conflict is. Give them those I statement techniques. Talk to them, build them up how they're going to talk about it. Figure out what their expectations are. I just want them to shut up isn't a good expectation. Yeah. Dial it back from that a little bit. Get them to something that makes sense to you and makes sense to them. Because a lot of times, we just want the problem to go away. We don't actually have a reasonable expectation. We want to just subtract that out. And that's not going to work. No one can just stop. Don't do that. Doesn't work. But if we can say, here's what I want, then you talk to the other person. Find out what they want. Do the same thing. That becomes a crucial part, because you now have gotten them both solution focused. You've gotten them to change their expectations from an expectation of, I just wish this person would stop talking, to, I wish this person would talk at this time instead of this time. Or, I wish that this person would provide more information about what they're doing instead of at the last minute coming in like a magician and saying, look, project's done. That makes a difference. When you sit down, you encourage a meeting with them. You facilitate the meeting. You act as a mediator. And part of what you need to do is make sure everyone gets heard, make sure that they know everyone is going to get heard, and you also want to set a time frame. When you're talking about conflict, there's always the kitchen sink phenomenon that comes up where you do this, this, and this. You want to reduce that, obviously. But you also don't want it to spill over into, well, now not only am I meeting with this person I can't stand, I'm missing, you know, an hour of time I had allocated for something else because we keep talking and talking and talking. Set a time frame. Say we're going to allot 20 minutes to talk about this at this time. You, me, and the other person. And we're going to stick to that. If we're not done in 20 minutes, we'll talk again. But I'm going to respect your time because it's valuable and I'm not going to take more of it. That helps a lot. Because if you're trying to deal with conflict and you're already at a point where someone's thinking, I got to go, I'm running late, their blood pressure is going up and they're, again, moving more towards caveman brain, which we don't want. So, theoretically, through talking about these things, you have dealt with the conflict. Or gotten even. Afterwards, is the conflict done? Can you be sure we've talked about it, this issue is over? Probably not, right? So, you have to do something that no one likes. The conflict has been put away. You have to open it up again and say, how are things going? This is scary because usually what happens, you have this meeting and someone thinks, oh, I did something wrong, I better be good for a bit and I'm just going to be on my best behavior for a while. But like New Year's resolutions, these things tend to fade and the problems sometimes come up again. So you may have to check in. And you can check in individually, you can check in as a group, whatever suits the temperament of the people involved, whatever fits with you. So, yes, how are things going? Are these, we talked about this, this, and this. Are this and this still going? Are they still issues? Did it work? Did something new come up? Did you find out that once they stopped talking, the meeting got worse? Or you realized that that filled a valuable role in some fashion. That now we have 10 minutes of dead air at the end of every meeting. And then you problem solve again. Don't be afraid to go back to the drawing board. So we have a little bit of time left. And I want to open this up to people who have conflicts in their clubs that they feel comfortable talking about. And again, getting some thoughts on how to deal with it.
Go ahead, Donna, talk about Ivor.
She's the problem.
Yeah, I have to be very careful because my paychecks come from that household. So,
This may require
It's
private
all
counseling.
my
I can't believe they're
fault.
picking on
I
you.
can't believe that.
Well, wait,
We
as
know
a,
that.
as a psychologist, I'll be the first to tell you, admission of the problem is the first step towards recovery.
Here's the thing.
just one thing, please.
Just the thing. Here's the thing. Rotary, I've said this many times, Rotary is like family. We all become so passionate about our perspective. It's like you never disagree with someone more vehemently than you disagree with someone in your family, and you're never able to agitate anybody as much as you are able to agitate any member of your family. And Rotary is the same way. We can agitate and get under each other's skin in a nanosecond, just like you can in family. And to me, that's part of the strength of Rotary as well, because we are also passionate about it and we come from different directions. But that's the key thing, is I think that when people care is so much about something and everyone else doesn't think about it in the exact same way that I think about it, they are wrong. It's that simple.
But that can be disarmed by starting out with that basic, we're all passionate
Right.
about it.
Right.
I think it's important to remember that people belong to Rotary to volunteer, and they're taking their time away from other activities, whether it's work or family, you gotta remember at the end of the day, they're there for the right reasons, most people, and that they're volunteering their time. And I think if you keep that in mind, then, you know, only good things can happen.
Yeah, it's a lot easier when everyone's choosing to be there rather than feeling like, you know, I was born into this crazy place.
Randall, the one thing I'd like to say, I know we were kidding Donna and everybody, and obviously the guys are a very tight-knit club, but if a new member was coming in, now you smoke. Are we in Colorado? Anyhow, the point I really want to make, and maybe you could throw something in on this, that's all fine and well if, let's say, the seasoned members are having a discussion. It could be a loud discussion, but if you have a brand new member there, somebody that's just a few months, they may not understand. And my question would be, let's just say something happens, the tension's felt. What would you suggest to do with that newer member? I would think you'd want to take them aside and explain the situation at some point.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because if you're having a really heated discussion as part of your meeting, you're not necessarily going to notice the new member that's slowly backing out of the room because you're so focused on what's going on. This requires a little bit of process management. You need to pay attention to the room first of all, because as a club leader, you're leading the group. But when it comes to taking that member aside, absolutely. After the meeting, explain. Or put a few feelers out. Let people know, you know, hey, if someone comes to you and says, wow, is it always like this? Did they have an answer for it? Then it's not, yeah, it's always like this, but then it's crazy.
Even if it may be.
Well, even if it is, it's for the right reason. You know, some clubs run very nicely on consensus. Others take, you know, the lawyer aspect of it, where we collide 2 points of view together, and whatever's left standing, that must be the correct way. But you explain that. You don't be afraid to talk about the process. You show that after you argue, that you get along with each other. You don't just walk out at the end of the meeting. If you've had a heated meeting, you have that polite kind of de-escalation moment. So again, you're communicating clearly to your new member, everything is okay. You may not even have to take them aside at that point if they see, you know, you're joking around with these people afterwards. Does that kind of help?
I think it does.
Okay.
Okay. Everything that you talked about is very helpful as far as diffusing individual situations as they come up. But what do you do about someone who is habitual in what they do and bad behavior, and they have done it repeatedly with several clubs?
Ooh.
Do that one, Brian. That's a tough situation.
Those things, they're tough, and I'll talk with you at break if you want, but I will say as a general thing, if it's a repeat offender, part of how it got that way is no one brought it up when it first started. And that may even predate their involvement in Rotary.
I think sometimes in a district, if we see this kind of behavior, we need to inform our surrounding clubs that
Watch out
we're
for this
stepping
one.
on a landmine if you're admitting this member, and this is why, and take their leadership aside and talk to them and explain that this has happened in 2 or 3 clubs, you don't want to go there.
You have something to say in your defense,
You can't apply
Ron?
for membership.
Yeah.
Propose.
I want to defend myself. No, but
Who are you?
yeah. This is an issue that obviously happens. I'm glad it's being addressed this way. And some of it is, to me, it's you have to look at it from the other side and not allow this to happen, because I'm going to use my own club. We want to be attractive to new members, and let's use the term even younger members. Try to get, you know, what do they see if you walk in and you're reluctant to change? Your reluctance, I mean, you've got to kind of look at it from their perspective too. What are they walking into? I mean, I still have the seats being taken by the same people. Is it a conflict? In some sense it is, because they won't give that up.
Right, assigned seats
I
aren't
mean,
necessarily.
we tried to say, guess what, you're not, oh man, I had people, they wouldn't come back for a few weeks. I mean, so it's allow the conflicts not to happen sometimes is better than trying to create,
Yes.
to go after the conflict.
Absolutely. If you can avoid it, go with that route. Okay, folks. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Randall.